Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, February 21st, 2025, and the time is 9:04 a.m., and I will call this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. We will begin with the pledges of allegiance. Ms. Escalante Castillo is going to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Sorry, were we supposed to already have roll call? It's my first time doing this. No, we have a roll call now. Sorry. My brain has left the building. Okay, we will have roll call. Oh, I thought we did roll call and then
We do, but this is one of the things we changed to forego that part of it and just
Perfect. Oh,
move
that's-
straight to excusing
You're right.
absences.
You're right. That's why it's not on here. Okay. See, this isn't me. This is a new thing. Okay. So Ms. Robinson is not here with us today, and she gave notice a few days ago. So I will hear a motion to excuse her absence.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept Stephanie's absence as excused.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. Bolton. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 3. The only opening remarks that I have today is that we are going to move agenda item number 13, which is our executive session, to between agenda items number 16 and 17. And we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the election of vice chair and secretary. I believe at the November board meeting, Mr. Bolton nominated Ms. Reed Lynch for vice chair. Is there any other nominations?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that I would like to nominate Chance Bolton as vice chair.
Mr. Bolton is vice chair. Is there any other nominations?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I would nominate Mr. Castro for Board Secretary.
We have a nomination for Mr. Castro for board secretary by Mr. Bolton. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion to accept the nominations of Mr. Bolton for vice chair and Mr. Castro for board secretary?
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Sprinkle and a second by Mr. Eichelberger. Any further comments, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Next agenda item is agenda item number 5, which is appointments to committee. This is where we get a lot of our work done, and so I always appreciate everyone's willingness to serve. We have a few changes. The Education and Licensing Committee will be chaired by Mr. McAnally, and he will be joined by Mr. Castro and Ms. Sprinkle. The Enforcement Committee will be chaired by Ms. Reed Lynch, and Mr. Eichelberger and Ms. Robinson will continue on that committee as well. Budget and Financing will continue to be chaired by Ms. Robinson, along with Ms. Escalante Castillo and Mr. McAnally on that committee. And I would like to ask Mr. Bolton to join the Joint Audit Committee with TREC. Thank you. Thank you all for your willingness to serve on the committees. Moving on to agenda item number 6. This is a discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of mentors. The mentor material starts on page 6 in the first attachment. Ms. Santos.
Right. Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Kathleen Santos, your General Counsel. Before you is agenda item number 6 regarding the appointment of board mentors. I wanted to begin a little bit with some background on the program. The board mentorship program has been around for over 10 years, and these are all very experienced appraisers that serve as mentors, primarily for working with respondents to provide remedial education. Also in the context of an applicant for licensure, we can award contingent approval of a license with completion of mentorship. And the purpose of all this is to help appraisers to address what needs to be addressed in their practice. And they can move on and continue to appraise or get their license and continue with their careers. So it's an important program, and it's something unique to Texas. Mentors are appointed every 2 years in February, at our February meeting for a 2-year term. And so the list of applicants before you are those that have previously served, and then we have 2 additional new mentors that have applied, and staff's recommendations here are to approve as mentors the individuals listed to serve as mentors for 2 years. And I'm available for any questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions? We certainly appreciate these mentors volunteering to serve. And I'm a little surprised, is Texas still the only state that, as far as we know, that does it?
Melissa might be able to answer for certain, but I know a lot of states have reached out to us about this program.
About it, yeah.
We are
That's
still
interesting.
the only one that
Yeah.
has this type of program.
Especially as long as we've been doing it. I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't caught on elsewhere. But we certainly appreciate those appraisers in Texas that are willing to do it. You have to have a pretty good resume in order to meet that qualification, so we appreciate that they're willing to serve their time. If there's no further questions, we can consider a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the board appoint the 12 members listed as the 2025 member applicants to serve as mentors for the period of 2 years as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McAnally and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you again to those 12 applicants. Moving on to agenda item number 7, which is general comments from visitors on non-agenda items. And this is opportunity for anyone from the public to speak on anything that's not on an agenda item. We haven't received any requests to speak. Agenda item number 8 is the ratification of the official record of the November 14th, 2024 board meeting as approved for posting on the website of the Secretary of the Board. The minutes start in the second PDF that we received. They start on page 2. If anyone has no corrections to the record, we can consider a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I move that we ratify the official record for the November 14th, 2024 board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Mr. Castro. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 9 are the final orders and surrenders in enforcement matters A, B, and C. These are included in our materials. I don't have the page number written down, but these don't require any action by the board, but they are available for discussion or questions if anyone should have any. Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 10, the report by the executive committee. This is on page 28 in our materials. I think the minutes are pretty robust and capture all the things that we talked about in executive committee, a lot of housekeeping items in there. So if there's no questions from any board members. Agenda item number 11 is the report by the Joint Audit Committee, and this is on page 31 in our materials. Again, I think I mentioned this last time, we talked about making sure that some of the big important items like IT and what was the other item that we wanted to make sure that we audited on a regular basis? Finances. That as opposed to trying to fit audits into our audit budget, that we would make sure that the right things are getting audited, and if we need to adjust the budget, that we would do it that way as opposed to the other way around. And Trek has agreed to that as well, and of course we share that expense. So I just wanted to mention that for future budget discussions in the event that we need to make we do budgets so many years in advance that if we need to make changes, I want to make sure that we have the flexibility to do that. If there are no questions about the audit committee report, we can move on to staff reports. Agenda item number 12. These start on page 33 in our materials, and we welcome Executive Director Buchholz.
Good morning. I have to start by introducing to you Vanessa Burgess, our new Deputy Executive Director here in the red sweater. She'll be working primarily with the commission, but I wanted you to be able to put a face with a name. She previously served as general counsel for Trek, and we've done a little bit of a shuffle to account for her change, but I'm delighted to have her in this spot. I have relied on her for a long time for a variety of things, and so it was a natural transition. As the chair mentioned, you have staff reports available to you in your materials. I wanted to just highlight a few things in there. The first is that you'll see in our customer service report that we had a slightly higher call hold time in December. I want to warn you that that will carry over into January when you see those numbers. And this is due to the heavy call volume at the end of December and the beginning of January, really that transition between the new year at the same time that we had a few things happening. We had state holidays. We had the reward of having New Year's Eve closed because of meeting a goal in raising funds. And we also had an unexpected, it was planned, but not months in the future, not for very long, a power outage on a work day just before the Christmas holiday. So that meant that there were limited opportunities for those needing assistance to call in, and we got a significant call volume on 2 days at the end of December, and then we were recovering at the very beginning of January. I believe I have this statistic right that we received 23 or 24% of our call volume in the final 2 days of December. So we knew it would be heavy. It was heavier than we expected it to be. But one of the things that I want to note on that is that those long hold times used to be the norm. Now they are an anomaly, and we can easily recover from them. And that's a testament to Robert Hood and his team and his work to make sure we're fulfilling our duties and serving customers well. So thank you, Robert. You'll also see in our reporting that the mandatory reporting period for the AMC National Registry is now open. AMC's registered in Texas, and then federally regulated AMCs operating in Texas must submit mandatory reporting and pay the associated fee by the end of March. Those fees are transmitted to the ASC in their entirety. We're simply a pass-through there. We seem to be tracking with similar numbers to last year. Just for comparison, at the end of January of this year, 2025, we've had 31% of AMCs have submitted their reports, compared to about 28% the year before. So negligible difference. As far as enforcement, I want you to note that for a short time, as you'll recall, government-sponsored enterprises took over as the highest volume source of complaints. Historically, that has been consumer complaints, but the government-sponsored enterprises recently took over as the highest. We have gone back to consumer complaints being the highest at 58%. So we've kind of settled back into a norm. Of course, I have Melissa here if you want to talk about any level of detail there. She knows it. She knows the ins and outs of it. One more operational update. We continue the ramp project, of course. I've been talking to you about this, I think now for at least 2 years, maybe 3, with our vendor Acela. And we have finalized a go-live date. Thank goodness. It will coincide with the change in our fiscal year, end of August, beginning of September. And we will soon begin our communications effort with license holders on what that will mean for our license holders. And part of that will be to encourage early renewals during that transition period so people don't get caught up in that transition. This is such a heavy lift. I say that each report. And we are definitely at the height of intensity right now as we march towards that go live date. But I'm really excited about what it will offer once that go live date hits and we settle into that new normal. Later in the agenda, which might be in like 5 minutes at this rate, we'll see how we go. You will talk about my performance, and I never really know how best to respond to that publicly. So I wanted to just take a moment here to say thank you. Thanks for your feedback that you provided me in your written evaluations. Thank you for your continued confidence in me based on that feedback. I feel like I'm getting my sea legs, but I continue to work to improve my knowledge of this industry, to lead well, and to serve the public with wisdom and with character. I'm humbled by your encouragement and your positive feedback, and also I genuinely appreciate hearing your comments for improvement. I plan to spend this year, which is my 6th as executive director / used to be commissioner, rolling out this database I just mentioned, and then of course navigating the legislative session and making sure we implement any changes well. And then working closely with our incredible staff who do all of the actual good work. And I am grateful for each of you and for your partnership in TALCB's success. And more than anything, I just have to say that it is the staff who do the work, and they make me look really good, and I am grateful. Lastly, or almost lastly, this is a unique time. Of course, at the federal level, we see a leadership change in Washington. And we are watching to see what that means for the appraisal industry. We expect and we have seen some policy shifts, and we are just determining how those shifts will affect the work that we do. A few things that we see today are changes at the ASC, at the ASC for staffing. Of course, the general counsel changed over at the end of last year. Their executive director retired at the end of the year, and they are searching for a new executive director there. Decisions are slow coming out of the ASC as they're in that transition of leadership, of course. Additionally, the president's buyout of federal employees might affect the ASC, and so we're watching to see how that might, how they may be affected there. And then there are changes in approved grant activities. Grant activities can no longer address reducing barriers to entry, which means we are in the process and really have rescoped our grant application. We're pivoting towards covering technological expenses. For example, some upgrades to the ramp project specific to appraisers, and then potentially a laptop refresh, that type of thing. The reason for this is just that there was a review of funding of what's eligible under Title 11, which, and it was deemed that the reducing barriers to entry does not obviously fall under that. And so we will continue to provide you more information as we kind of finish that pivot. We're in close touch with the grants team at the ASC to make sure that we are receiving maximum funding. We feel like we have plenty of flexibility to do that. We're just working to see what the best projects are there.
Chelsea?
Yes, sir.
So in that, and if we're able to get these technological grants, do we have the ability to kind of reallocate other sources to cover things that we don't have grants for anymore?
Yes, kind of. And I think we're navigating that right now. We know that we cannot, the grant term is supplant, meaning basically fund what we are already funding using grant funds. And so like if we already had something budgeted with other dollars, we can't reallocate that for grant funds. Okay. So we're navigating to see kind of what that looks like. As the funding at TREC is a little bit more questionable, just on the TREC side, we're waiting to hear from the governor's office on a potential fee increase. So that is very much in flux right now. And so the funding level at TREC is a little bit unstable, I would call it. And so that creates some opportunity potentially for some grant funds to be utilized for TALCB. But stay tuned. I mean, just this morning we received feedback from the grants team saying you can do this, but not that. And so we're working it out.
Okay, thank you.
Lastly, I just wanted to remind you that between now and the next meeting, we all collectively have personal financial statements due. That's at the end of April. That is true if you serve one day as a board member in the year 2025. So I just wanted you to mark your brain calendar for that. And that we are really not, that's not something that the agency or staff knows much about, but if you need help, we're happy to do all we can to help you navigate. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it for staff reports? There's no, okay. Very good. And as I noted earlier, we are moving agenda item number 13 until after agenda item number 16. So that takes us to agenda item number 14. And I realized that the page numbers I had were when our materials were split into two, and I think I've figured it out. So I hope I'm giving you the right page numbers now. Agenda item number 14 starts on page 131 in the digital copy of our materials. Mrs. Santos.
They're also on page 64 if you're still looking at other split up materials. But agenda item number 14, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, section 159.204, complaint processing, and new rule 22 Texas Administrative Code, section 159.203, sanctions guidelines. So the amendments before you clarify the preliminary investigative review process. We're adding language related to the online payment of administrative penalties and required fees. And we're also moving our sanctions guidelines from 159.204 to its own rule in 203. And both of these are being amended for renumbering and updating corresponding references within the rule. We did not receive any comments on the amendments in the new rule. So staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, section 159.204, and new rule 159.203 as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption. And I'm available for any questions.
And so because the Education and Licensing Committee didn't meet, is this the first time that the board members are, excuse me, seeing these changes?
We're up for adoption.
These are for adoption.
Last meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that.
Nothing
Okay.
proposed. That's what's kind of might be throwing you off.
Right. Okay. Very good. If we didn't receive any comments, I think that's a good thing. We can consider a motion.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, I don't know who that was.
That was me, sorry.
Mr. Bolton.
I move that the board approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 15 is on either 76 or 143 in our materials. Mrs. Santos.
Number 15, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 153.16, license reinstatement. So the amendments before you, we're defining requirements for reinstating a trainee license. If you recall, about a year or so ago, we revamped this restatement process for our licensed and certified appraiser licenses, and now we're just addressing the same thing for our trainees. This ultimately is we're going to reduce the barriers to entry to try to get your trainee's license back. We did not receive any comments, and staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 153.16, as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Any questions for Ms. Santos? If not, we'll hear a motion.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Reed Lynch.
move that the board approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. McAnally. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item number 16, rule review. This is on page either 78 or 145 in our materials. Mrs. Santos.
Number 16, discussion and possible action to propose review of 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 153, rules relating to the provisions of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Act. So as you're all very familiar, every 4 years we review rules per statute. Part of what is considered is a review of these rules to be considered for readoption, revision, or repeal. And that will include whether the reasons for initially adopting these rules continue to exist. And if you're all now aware that we're on this new schedule, instead of reviewing all of our rules in a single year, we're taking manageable bites every year and opening up a chapter, reviewing it, and closing it, and going through this process. So staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for review 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 153, to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I would like for whoever makes a motion to say readoption, revision, and repeal and review. Any questions for Ms. Santos? Hearing none, I will consider a motion. I don't want to scare anyone. You don't really have to say that.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I move that we approve the proposal.
Second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Burgess is hoping that she gets to spend some more time with the board after this. So that takes us to our executive session that we have moved now before agenda item number 17. Executive session to discuss pending litigation or to obtain advice of legal counsel on agenda items pursuant to Texas Government Code 551071 and personnel matters relating to the performance review of the executive director pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074. The time is now 9:33. The board will go into executive session to obtain the advice of legal counsel or discuss pending or contemplated litigation, including settlement offers and enforcement actions pursuant to Texas Government Code 551071 and personnel matters pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074. We anticipate returning to open session in approximately 30 minutes, I would say. So we will be back then. Thank you. The time is now 10:17, and the board is back from executive session and reconvening in open session. This takes us to agenda item number 17, new business, discussion and possible action regarding the submission of comments in response to the ASC's proposed rulemaking. And this is on it starts on page 82 or 149. And our letter is on page 174. Mrs. Tran, Director Tran. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Melissa Tran, Director of TALCB. Before you in the materials for this item, you have the AAC proposed rule and also the TLBC's joint comment with 10 other states to that proposed rule. In summary, the AAC proposed this rule change on December 6th to codify the compliance review process. So this is a process that we go through every 2 years when they come to each of the states and they review for compliance with the policy statements. The rule as proposed makes sweeping changes to the compliance process as we know it. So it changes the rating criteria and categories. It would require states to review value-only complaints, which is something that we don't do in Texas. And
Wait, could you repeat that?
it would require states to review value-only complaints. It gives the AAC the option to change the review schedule. And as you all know, the compliance review is pretty burdensome for us. It's like lots of document collection, and having it on a regular schedule allows us to kind of plan it in. But in this proposed rule allows the AAC to accelerate the timeline if they wanted to. It also allows them to extend it if they wanted to too. So in the comment that we took the lead on drafting, we just really simply asked the AAC to establish a working group of stakeholders to talk through all of the proposals before taking final action. Talked to 10 other states and they all agreed, and so they agreed to sign on to this comment with us, and it was submitted February 4th. The AAC has their board meeting in May, so hopefully we'll learn more about their plans at that time. I will keep you all posted along the way, but with that I can take any questions that you have.
So sort of to draw the board's attention to it, on page 175, you can see where all the states have signed on to our letter. And I certainly appreciate y'all getting with the other states to get this done. Did we ever get any background on where these proposed rules, did they come out of ASC staff or a committee with ASC?
I think this was part of the new general counsel's one of the first things that he did. So there was a working group established over 10 years ago, and one of the recommendations from that AAC working group was to codify the policy statements. I guess they finally decided to pick that up 10 years later, and this is where they landed with that.
And I would imagine with a lack of leadership right now at the ASC between executive directors, that there could be very little movement on this for a little while? Or is this because it's now been published, it's kind of, the ball is rolling?
I tried to get us some answers on what was happening timeline-wise with this proposed rule, and I don't think anybody at the ASU really quite knows yet. They're still waiting. So there was an executive order from the president freezing all rulemaking. I didn't know if this was going to be impacted by it, and the ASC also was waiting on direction. So I think you're right. It's probably going to be a slow process.
Okay. So we never did hear, and the deadline for submitting comments wasn't changed, even though there was a moratorium on new rules. Okay. Very good.
Well, given that the rulemaking pause, I mean, that could be the next 4 years. I mean, and there may be less rules. I guess my point is that that sounds like that's really in flux.
Yeah.
Well, I would also say, given that some of these rules feel like it would take a lot for us to comply with them in the sense of meeting all these requirements, that if we need to, as a board, reach out to members of the ASC that are on the board, embarrassingly, I don't really know the structure of how that works, but if there's more that we need to do, then I think we're certainly ready and willing to be part of that conversation. Anything else? Thank you, Director Tran. That takes us to agenda item number 18, discussion regarding the performance review and salary of the TALCB executive director. Again, this happens every year, and it's a process. They survey all the 9 TREC commissioners and the 9 board members as well. They survey the executive director's direct reports, and then they do a sampling of staff as well. At both meetings, the TREC meeting and the TLCB meeting, we go over the findings, and then we talk to the executive director in executive session to discuss any issues. I would say that the results are pretty consistent with where they were last year for both the surveys from both the board and the commission. The executive director got very high marks from staff again this year. I like to go through those and read them and sort of see the consistency. There's lots of kindness. Work-life balance was mentioned several times by staff, and I think that that's hugely important, especially for state agencies that have some limitations on the way that we reward staff, and that you continue to explore ways to keep people satisfied in their job. I think, when they say that there's a work-life balance, I think that speaks, that says a lot, and I appreciate you taking that effort with staff. Approachable, guidance and trust, and were some of the other words that I saw several times throughout the surveys. And one that that sort of stood out to me is someone said she invests in each of us. And so I want to say that we all appreciate that. And running a large organization with everybody sort of scattered out, I understand how difficult that is. And I'll say that I appreciate it, and I think I speak for the board that we all appreciate that. The commission is responsible for taking any action related to the salary of the executive director, and they completed all their process and discussed all of this at their February 10th meeting. So we were the second to do it. I will open the floor for any additional comments from any other board members, if anybody else has anything to add.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bolton.
I would just like to kind of reiterate the things that we discussed in executive session. I think that you have taken this agency very far in the time that you've been here, and I think you put together a very efficient, strong staff, and as a board who have oversight, that's really appreciated. And we thank you and your team. Y'all have done a fantastic job, and I look forward to you doing this for many more years.
Ditto.
Very good. That takes us to agenda item number 19, update regarding legislative matters. Ms. Mandel.
Good morning. Hello. Hi. Good morning, Chair Oates, board members. I'm Summer Mandel, Government and Strategic Communications Director for the board and the Texas Real Estate Commission. You probably know me best from my comms role, but I'm here today in my government relations role. So much of that role is very similar to the communications role. I gather information, connect people, try to understand what's going on, but it's geared toward the legislative process. And so offices will contact us outside of session and during session for various reasons. So like constituent inquiries when they need help. So I'm the point person for that and finding the right staff member. And then of course, tracking legislation and making sure that everyone is aware of what's going on and what it might mean for us as an agency and for the industry for appraisers. So I'm just going to give you some quick timelines. So March 14th is the 60-day bill filing deadline, and then sine die last day of regular session is June 2nd. Of course, the governor can call special sessions as he so desires, so we'll see how that plays out. As of this morning, about 4,700 bills have been filed. We're tracking about 250 of those bills. A lot of those bills are related to state agency operations, and they're is a report that I sent to y'all that it was on January 31st, and it has some of the key bills that we're tracking with an analysis of that. And so I welcome any feedback that you have on that report or questions that you might have. The next one will come to you next week. It'll have some updates for you on what things may have been assigned to committees or have been scheduled for a hearing or new things. As far as the appraisal industry is concerned, there hasn't been too much different than what you saw in that report. So the House committees have been assigned, but there haven't been any referrals to those committees yet. I think the assignments just happened last week, I want to say. We do have some of the bills we're tracking that have been referred to Senate committees, about 50 of those. Many are related to the state agency operations. There's a handful of landlord-tenant issues. We've seen many bills related to foreign buyers and entities purchasing real estate, and so some of those have made that. The bill that would require the board to have reciprocity, where it specifically names the board in that bill, that was referred to a committee, and I've been in touch with that office, and there will be a committee substitute. And I've not been told exactly what that says, but I did request that we would be removed from that, since there are a lot of conflicts if we were to do that, since we already have reciprocity through federal requirements. So the TALCB housekeeping bill, I'll give you an update on that. So the industry is supportive of those changes that the board identified to increase our efficiencies and benefit consumers. The bill draft was with Ledge Council this week. We spoke to them this week too, just to give some clarifying information. So I'm hopeful that it will be filed soon. Maybe it'll be in your bill report next week. Hope so. As a reminder of what's in that bill, I'll just quickly walk through that. So adding an option for a primary contact to the AMC chapter. So making it a licensed or certified appraiser, being able to serve in that role. Clarify the qualification requirements of a controlling person. So basically expanding or clarifying that an AMC may not have controlling persons with a probation, suspension, or revocation. That's just kind of closing a loophole that we identified. Contact information. So I've talked about this a lot, and you've probably heard about it a lot. SB 510 from last session made it so licensing agencies like ours had to keep private certain information about license holders. So that's contact information primarily. So if you go on our site now and you search for an appraiser, it just says like their name and the county that they're in. And so we've heard a lot of feedback about how that makes it difficult to find people, especially when you're in a place that has, 25 John Smiths and you're of Houston and you don't know which John Smith that is. So that is part of that bill, so that we can display contact information for license holders, and also the board stipend program. So as a reminder on that, we were looking for regulatory authority to administer a stipend program to award funds to aspiring appraiser, so trainees and supervisors or people who might wish to become supervisors, because it does cost money, for you to be a supervisor, to take that time, and also entering the industry. So we did have grant funding for that, but as you have heard, some of those activities have been paused. However, we're still moving forward with that in the bill because we're hopeful that it will return and we'll find a means to fund that program. We did make one small change to remove a reference to collecting fees to administer the program. That was kind of a belt and suspenders thing. That's one of the things that the industry didn't love, even though we did not have any intention to implement fees, but we took that out. So the intent there of it being a grant-funded program remains, or gifts, just without the fee mechanism. And then there's two little changes. We needed to update commissioner to executive director in the AMC chapter. We just missed that last time when we did that search and replace. And then we need to modify 1104.202 to mirror 1103.552 to require penalties be deposited into the general revenue fund. And I know when I said those numbers, you were like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer questions you might have. Great.
Just so the board is aware that reciprocity bill that was filed also said that all we could charge was $100. So, and we charge, a significantly higher fee for that to be.
That's actually a different bill.
Oh.
Yeah, there's two. That one that you're talking about with the fee cap, that one would also affect TREC. That one is more broad to lots of occupational licensing entities. This one is similar about reciprocity, but it had a list of certain boards and commissions that it would apply to. And this is the one where TALCB was listed specifically as it applying to. So,
Which I thought, why wouldn't they just say all boards that don't already have reciprocity, right? Like that would just make sense if they're trying to make everybody get on board, that's fine. But if we already have that, it's interesting that they would include us. But anyway.
One with the cap, that one hasn't been referred to a committee yet, but we're still watching that one because of that cap, and the point that you were making is still valid on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but obviously that would be a budgetary concern if, I don't recall how many licenses we issue by reciprocity. But so just remind us, I assume you have some sort of software that flags certain terms. I mean, when 4,700 bills, that it can't be. We don't go through that by hand. And then if you find something, you send it to Director Tran to see, kind of as the first something you think might be related to us.
Yes, I'm really glad you mentioned that. So we use a service called Telecon, and it does have some of that keyword tracking, but also I'm very particular, and I look at every caption like every day just to see if it looks like it relates to us. And then there are some, usually I send it to Kat or our Vanessa, or general counsel, and say, hey, does this affect us in any way? Do you want to track it? So there are some bills that are in there that we're just we just want to know about, and isn't necessarily relevant to anybody but us, but usually it's related to things like Public Information Act, open meetings, pay, state agency pay, longevity pay. There's one about public comments. That one actually got referred to a committee where we would need to sort public comments by certain, are you a person affected by this rule? Are you not? Are you a Texan? Are you not a Texan? Like, it's just, it's a little bit of, math you have to do there. But yeah, so between Telecon putting out reports with some keywords, so occupations codes, 1103, 1104, appraiser management, of course, us by name. It's also a daily review of what's been filed and what the captions say, and then what does the bill say. And I'm starting to get better at knowing which ones we need to track, but I rely heavily on everyone else who is smarter than me to do the analysis on that. So the analysis that you receive has been through attorneys too. And also Renata is one of our reviewers as well. So.
And Kat, do you have a microphone that you can speak from there? Can you just tell us, so when you get it from Summer, then what is your process?
Well, I think what she was referring to is sort of the initial, should we be tracking this process? So it's like a quick review. Is there anything about, us specifically, appraisal practice or something that we should be following? And then once it's in sort of the bucket of, yes, we're tracking, there's several reviewers that actually do a bill review and like more in-depth analysis, and we go through and discuss. And so it's it could be 2 steps.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we'll tag things like if it's enforcement related, if it's licensing related, if it just applies to the board or TREC or the agency wide. Multiple people might review a bill, but I really lean heavily on CAT because the appraisal ones are hard, and there are a lot of bills related to the appraisal industry as it relates to county appraisal districts, which is not something that we would track. So appraisal gets put up a lot, and I have to go, well, not exactly our appraisal to do. So, but yeah, that's part of how we analyze it all. And then we have a bill review meeting every week too. I forgot about that, where we walk through all of them and just make sure we're all on the same page, and whether we need to alert our senior team or other staff members. Because right now, without things being in hearings, it's sort of like, just know about this and the potential impact. It's going to speed up a lot once hearings start happening. Substitutes start being filed. We're going to have to look at our analysis again, see if we've been added or things have been implicated in any way. So right now it's the slow time.
Okay. I think if there's any bills that any staff is testifying on, if we could just be alerted of that, if that, in a committee or something. I would also add about the publishing contact information. If that bill doesn't pass, because I know it was a result of a statute that we stopped publishing that information, but I might suggest to the board that appraisers maybe we could give them the opportunity to opt into a published, because appraisers are unique in the sense of, if I need something, appraised in Alpine, Texas, how do I find that appraiser and how do I get in touch with that appraiser? And not only is it banks, but AMCs and individuals. And so appraisers are probably people who do want to be found.
Right. Well, I'll defer to the lawyers, but I think we need regulatory authority to even ask you if you want to do it.
That's correct. Just for an example, the state bar had a mechanism for you to opt in, but that language was removed, and so they don't have, there isn't that authority to offer that opt-in option currently.
So that's really what we're seeking to, is to be able to do it, because we don't specify when we're collecting that. Are you giving us your home address? Are you giving us your home address that you use as your business address? Like, we just ask for it. And so that's why we needed to take it down, because we couldn't discern whether it was a personal, private address.
Yeah. Well, I think nobody's sending anyone letters anymore, so I don't think an address is, to me, it's more phone number or email that would be useful to people trying to find appraisal services.
Right.
So something to consider as we move forward. Does anybody have anything else for Ms. Mandel?
Great.
So when we see you again, we will still be in session, but we will be at the end of session, so we'll see how things are going then.
Yeah, but in the meantime, expect more updates, and the reports will come more frequently. It just has been some time because there's still filing going on and assignments being made and all of that, so.
An interesting first session for you.
Yeah, it sure is. All right, thanks, y'all.
Thank you. That takes us to agenda item number 20, discussion regarding the fiscal year 25 internal procurement, competitive solicitation process audit, and Public Funds Investment Act audit. And Ms. Williams will be walking us through this. I believe both of these audits are regular and required audits.
Good morning, Madam Chair. You should have the audit materials that were provided under separate cover, correct? So the first audit is Report 25001, the Financial Services Procurement Audit. It reviewed the competitive bid process to ensure that we were effective and efficient and compliant with the state requirements. It also confirmed the competitive bid solicitation process adhered to the applicable state regulations. On that particular audit, the scope was September 1st, 2022 to May 31st, 2024. The audit found that we were generally effective in our internal controls. We had no findings. However, we did have 2 opportunities for improvement, and improvement opportunity is just an area where the internal controls or processes are effective as designed, but could potentially be enhanced. So again, for focus area number 1, solicitation and evaluation process, no findings were noted. For focus area number 2, compliance with the Government Code Chapter 2155 and State Procurement and Contract Management Guide, no findings as well, general effective. The 2 opportunities for improvement were that we could utilize a dashboard for reporting our metrics to ensure that the competitive bid process comply with our internal management guide and procurement manual. And then we could also enhance our our procurement contract and compliance checklist, so that we made sure that we had digital tracking and inserted it into our workflow, and those things have already been done. We took advantage of that and was like, okay, that's an easy thing. We can do that in SharePoint, and it's done. The next audit was the PFIA, the Public Funds Investment Act audit. That's report 25-0002. Again, that's something that we do every 2 years just to make sure that we are compliant with that particular legislation. The audit scope was September 1st, 2022 through August 31st of 2024. Our internal control rating was generally effective as well. We did have 1 finding and 2 opportunities for improvement. So focus area number 1 was the investment policy. It was general effective, no findings were notated. Focus area number 2, the investment officer training, the commissioner and board member training, generally effective, no findings. Investment reporting, generally effective. However, we did have 1 finding, and that was an issue of a typo. So the investment holdings report for Trek Fund 3058 throughout the period of FY 23-24 contained a discrepancy. So it listed the incorrect purchase price. So when you're looking at the actual statement, the accountant recorded an amount like right above it. So she put the wrong amount for the purchase price on the particular internal spreadsheet, and that carried forward for 12 consecutive months. Like, no one went back to double check the purchase price that was recorded for June of 2023. Then the other finding that we had in regards to our internal typos or discrepancies was that we have on our purchase memos to purchase our securities on the 15th of the month. Well, the 15th was a Sunday, and so it didn't occur until the 16th. And so on the report, the staff had the 15th because that's generally the date that we select. However, on our statements from the bank, the purchase actually occurred on the 16th. So that was the finding. And so it's just making sure that we're QA/QCing, looking at those, making sure that those statements are correct and are reviewed. And then for the opportunities for improvement, it's just being clear about the sources of the available cash balance. So on those investment reports, we'll see beginning cash balance, but what you may not know or what may not be clear to you is the source of that. So is that money that we have in the Treasury? Is that money or cash that's in STC? So we're going to start listing that and specify where what all makes up that available beginning balance, just so that it's clear and remove the ambiguity. And that concludes the reports on those 2 audits. Were there any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? I do appreciate that although these are audited regularly, the fact that there are findings, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as that means that the audit is they're actually looking at things. And I think any kind of finding is a reminder to do better. I know that anytime anybody catches anything in my work, it always, makes me the next time around go like, okay, yeah, I got to double check my own work. And so I think that that's certainly helpful. When we talk about financial statements that we find have errors, I know that like financial statements are published on the website for several years. So how is that addressed in that sense? And are there rules surrounding that? Because sort of my thought, and I know as I've gone back past years to track things down, I find, if I find a discrepancy, I understand not just replacing it with the right one, because at some point another version of that existed in the world. And so I hate the idea that we would just correct our mistake and not acknowledge it, but also you want the correct information out there. So how do we do that?
So in regards to, for instance, this audit and these past financial statements, they were no longer on the website anymore. So it was just one of those things that they looked at that material for their particular audit scope. However, I'm not in the practice of just removing information and just putting the correct one up there. If something like that occurred and we submitted a staff report that had incorrect information, and you guys are sent a copy of that as well, we would have to let you know that, hey, we identified an error, we're going to make this swap, and this is why we're making the change. We just don't substitute and put the new one up there.
Yeah.
Could we consider maybe, if you had to do that, titling that report revised?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Then it would be.
Yeah, or even leaving the original and then adding the revised. I think that for transparency purposes, that makes a lot of sense. This reminded me of when we're talking about investments, our running list of things to possibly talk about during a workshop would be maybe our investment reports. I think that's something that I don't know that we've ever had conversations about. And do we know what those mean, and just, maybe kind of explaining that to the board? I think that would be helpful.
We can definitely talk about that in the workshop. I know we talk about it in budget committee, but we can definitely talk about it in the workshop.
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Anything else for Ms. Williams? Thank you, ma'am. Can you, before you, can you remind the board what is up next for us for audit?
Actually, at this point, they're doing the follow-up on audit. So we did a follow-up on an accounting audit, and then we also had the follow-up on the IT audit from last year.
Okay.
So those are the activities, and then they'll start risk assessment and then internal audit plan.
Okay. Yeah. So, Mr. Bolton, there's nothing, thank you for reminding me that, there's nothing that we have set for next year to audit. So they're going to kind of bring the whole list and figure out what the plan is going forward.
Actually, I just wrote down a note to get a list of all the audits, what they are.
And McConnell Jones did provide that to those of us on the audit committee. I'll make sure that you get a copy of that, because obviously that's going to be useful to planning the next audits.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Williams. That takes us to agenda item number 21, discussion and possible action regarding agenda items for future meetings. Just added one there for a workshop. Anything else? Hearing nothing, we will move to agenda item number 22, discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. These are on the last page, calendars are on the last page of our materials.
Is the August 15th already approved, that date for us?
It's tentative. Yeah.
I'll be out of town for that date.
Okay. So looking at, well, first, the next meeting is May 16th. Is that still work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Then the August 15th meeting, can someone sort of let us know what other conflicts in August we have so that we can look for an alternative date? Trek meetings, probably for those of us with school kids, the next week might be a little difficult, or the next 2 weeks, depending on.
The commission meeting is on August 11th.
It's on the 11th. That would make the 8th difficult. So probably the 1st or the 29th. I mean, I know 29th, it's probably most kids in Texas are in school by then, right? On the 29th?
29th is good.
Oh, I didn't think about that. It sure is. That's Labor Day weekend. Don't want to do Labor Day weekend. What about, we could do a Thursday, right? Probably people don't want to travel for that.
We also have kind of blocking out the end of August for the transition on ramp.
Oh,
End of
okay.
August, beginning of September. So probably earlier is better.
Okay.
Earlier is better for me. First.
I mean, we've done September before, if that's, would that be September 5th? Would that be, I mean, that is a short week. So look at September 5th.
We could, I think we need an August board for purposes of approving a budget for the fiscal
August,
year in
okay.
September.
I thought she was saying not the beginning of August. August 1st. How does August 1st look for everybody?
We're good.
Works for me.
Very good. August 1st. Everybody change your calendars for August 1st.
I think the
Friday.
room, we just need to confirm the
Okay.
room would be
Okay.
available, but.
Tentative, August 1st. Okay, and then we have been doing the following meetings. That would be November. Thanksgiving, I assume, is the 27th, 28th.
And if you
there.
wanted to book a workshop date as part of that.
So perhaps we don't want to do it right before Thanksgiving, so the 13th, 14th, does that conflict with anything? Veterans Day on a Tuesday? I thought it was always on a Monday. No? Always on the 11th, that's right. I knew that. Okay. 13th, 14th, we're good for that? Okay. The November 13th and 14th, put on your calendars as tentative workshop and board meeting dates. Okay, if there's nothing else, then the time is 10:54 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Stay warm.